Hello and welcome. In this short video we will be looking at academic references in the Morrisby platform. The reference system within the Morrisby platform follows a particular process, and there are a couple of setup things that you'll need to do and that you can do anytime, and then there are some specific things that you would do at particular times of the year. So the anytime things are updating your subject list to the subjects that you teach, adding any local names or descriptions that you have in your school, and then adding the school-wide statement, which is part of the new UCAS process. Second thing you can do anytime is match the staff, teaching staff to the subjects, and you can do that via the hire menu, and we'll have a look at that in a second. And then of course, typically in year 12, students select their subjects, so one of the precursors is making sure that the student subject list is correct. And then finally, obviously, staff are going to write their reference parts, assemble them into a complete reference, and then typically that's then copied and pasted into the UCAS site as part of the application process. So there is a menu on the left-hand side of the Morrisby platform called Hire, and from here, this is where you would access the subject setup via that edit button for subjects and matching teachers. And the other setup button relates to personal statements, which I guess in most schools you'll be doing at the same time. Now, the school-wide statement, which is part of the new UCAS approach, is accessed via the cog, and there's a specific menu called UCAS reference, and you can just put in there your text for your school-wide statement, and then that can then be added to any reference as you want. Now, I mentioned that you need to set up your subject list. So if you click that button on the Hire menu, it will take you to a screen that looks like this with the list of your subjects. And all you have to do here essentially is tick the subjects that you teach in your school, and if you want to add a specific name in the subtitle, you can. And this will then be the subject list that will be presented to students when they want to then select which A-levels or BTECs or T-levels or IB that they're studying, depending on the curricula that you have in your school. Once you've made sure that that subject list is correct, then typically what you want to do then is match your teaching staff to those subjects. So you do that via the Hire menu, and you'll see there's a couple of ways of doing it. You can do this on bulk by going to a subject and then selecting all the members of staff that teach that subject, or you can actually do it one at a time via the staff page, but that's less efficient, so I'd suggest you do it subject by subject. You just click the pen and then add the members of staff that are teaching that subject. Of course, if it's you could also add other members of staff. For example, also want to check references, maybe the head of sixth or a key stage 5 lead, depending on how you organise yourselves. Now, having done both those tasks, when a student logs into Morrisby, in fact, the first time they log in when they're in year 12, they will automatically be presented to a page that looks like this, where they are invited to select the subjects that they are studying at 16 plus. So as you can see in the case of Alfie is has ticked the box for mathematics, physics, computer science, and an EPQ. Now, as part of this, they can, if they want to, select an expected grade, and they can, if they want, select a member of staff from what will be a drop-down list if there's more than one who is teaching that. Now, of course, anyone who's in that list, when we get to this teacher side, can actually provide the reference, so it's not vital that this is done. And worst case, if the student hasn't done this, all this can be done via impersonation by a member of staff, so it's not the end of the world if the students haven't done this. But it's good practice for the students the first time they log into Morrisby in year 12 to select the subjects that they're going to take. So we then move on to the reference itself, and this is accessed by going into the student page and clicking on the tab that says UCAS reference. So here we've clicked on Alfie's name within the student list, and we've clicked the UCAS reference tab, and we're brought to his reference. Now, you'll have the option to select what type of reference, so we still support the older conservatoire types as well as the new UCAS sort of 24 type. And you can also get to this screen from notifications. You'll see that there's a task in my task list, And you'll also see a bit later on I will get an email notification saying I've got some tasks to complete in terms of references. Now, the reference then would be assembled together, and of course depending on whether you've gone with the older style of conservatoire or the new structure of the UCAS reference, the idea here is that the biology teacher will click the pen and add the reference part, so the bullet points or the information on biology. Business studies would have done theirs, English literature would have done theirs. Whoever's assembling this can then copy the school-wide statement from the master copy, and then somebody, if they want to, can add the extenuating circumstances. In some schools this is being left to Senkos or pastoral leads or the head of sixth, but depending on permissions, anyone with the right permissions can do that. And typically what's happening is in other supporting information, the information from the parts, the biology, the business studies and the English literature, is then copied across to form essentially the academic part of the reference. So that's how it's assembled. As you can see, here's one with text in it from a school-wide statement, and for whoever's chasing up the references, you'll see that there is actually a chase button, and that will send a notification and an email to any member of staff that hasn't yet completed their part of the reference process. Now, as I mentioned before, any text that's written in the subject parts, the biology, the English, the geography, can be automatically appended into the other supporting information. Of course, it can still be edited as you go. There's an auto save in here, so you won't lose anything. And then typically what you'll do once somebody's checked it over is then you'll see there's a box to mark it as complete. So at that point, that then tells the system that this bit is signed off and done. And once that's all done, then typically what somebody will then be doing is copying that into the UCAS site as part of the application process. You can see how this progress is being made, because on the main student menu there's a tab that says Hire, and here this is a summary of kind of everything you need to know within your sixth form. So you'll see which ones have produced shortlists under the favourite courses. Under specialists you'll see which ones have got choosing courses that require early entry, BMAT, LNAT, Oxbridge, that sort of thing. If you are using the Morrisby system for predicted grades, you'll see how many of those have been completed under the grades column, and under the references column you'll see for those subject areas how many have been completed for the subject parts, and if it's completely green you'll see that it's been signed off and approved. And also, while you're at it, on the personal statement column you'll be able to see which students have got a draft or completed their personal statement using the Morrisby system. So I mentioned from a staff point of view you'll get tasks, and if you click that task button you'll see what tasks are required. You'll see, if you click on predicted grades or subject references, you'll see then particular students, and then you can then go from there straight to actually putting in their reference without having to navigate the rest of the Morrisby system. And you'll also be getting emails, notification emails on a weekly basis once this all gets going, just to remind you how many you've got left to do, and there'll be a button there which will then take you specifically to the actual area to complete the reference or the personal statement. So let me show you all that in practice now. Here is a Morrisby system, and as I mentioned, we can go to the Hire menu to set up the subjects, and when we want predicted grades and references to be completed, we can choose our subjects. We can decide, for example, film studies where we don't have any members of staff. We can click the pen and decide which member of staff we want to add to that. So all pretty straightforward to do this, and of course this can be done before time just to match your subjects to your students. If there are subjects that you need to add or amend, then that's in the subjects menu there. I also mentioned the school-wide statement is under UCAS reference, so here's where we can put our school-wide statement for all referees to use. So let's go and look at the student experience. So I'm going to go and have a look at a student called Helen Davis. On her student page we'll see that currently that we can access her reference there, but if we go and look at her view of the world first, as I mentioned, the first time that she's in year 12, she will be taken to this particular page. Now you'll see that Helen's already checked that she's doing English literature, geography and biology. she hasn't set what grade she expects to get, and she hasn't set a teacher. So we can do that here if we want to. So we can see the list of teachers, there's 2 available, and she's being taught by me, and we can do the same with other subject areas. So coming back to the Morrisby system, and if we were needing to prepare Helen's reference, we would go to the UCAS reference tab under the student. And as you can see, we've got the various elements: school-wide statement, extenuating circumstances, and other supporting information. And first of all, I'm going to add the actual academic part of the reference. So for a moment, let's imagine that I am her teacher of English literature. We can add a predicted grade if we want to, and we've got a range higher and low, and we can put some narrative comments in there. And we can also then add the text for her academic reference for English literature. So I can click the pen, I can put the text in, and you can save that. Now, what you'll also see is that we can copy in here and refresh the school-wide statement. So I've added in the school-wide statement. Obviously, I can decide whether or not mitigating circumstances are required, and we can set a particular person to do that part. And then in the other supporting information, what we can do is then append the academic references through into there. So if I click the append, that's going to copy in that part from the English literature. Of course, I can still edit this, so I can append the other parts from the other members of staff, and I can write a finishing closing sentence. And as you can see, we've got a character count across the whole thing, and typically once this is all done, we'll mark it as complete, and we can mark the whole thing as complete, and you can see it's auto saving, and we've got a character count on the whole thing. So fairly straightforward. Of course, I could have got to here from a member of staff point of view from my task list. So if I just came in and opened my tasks, I can see the students that I've then got to do references for. So I've got one to do for Jasmine, so I can complete that task and actually just put in the reference here in this box like this. So a sort of quicker way, without having to know how to navigate the Morrisby system, I can just put my reference in there. Of course, whoever's managing the overall process, if we go to the students page and we look at this higher tab, we can at a glance see where we are with all our grades, references, personal statements. We were looking at Helen Davis earlier on. As you can see now, one part of her reference is completed, and she's not started her personal statement. So all pretty clear in terms of seeing where you are and what stage you're at. So now to summarise, we've had a look at the anytime task that you need to do in terms of setting up your school subjects and mapping your staff to those subjects and adding your school-wide statement. The process starts then with students ideally selecting which A-levels or IB subjects that they are taking, and then staff writing their reference parts, and then whoever's collating the overall thing adding the school-wide statement and any extenuating circumstances. That then is marked off as complete and can be ready copied into the UCAS site. From a management information point of view, you'll be able to see at a glance from that overall menu how you're doing as a school. So pretty much that's it. As Morrisby, we're quite happy to talk to you individually through our support site, but hopefully you've got a good understanding of our UCAS reference process through this video. Thank you.